All right, let me get everything, excuse me, set up for us today. All right. It's not what I wanted y'all to see. Hold on one second here. There we go. It's just slow, totally slow. Y'all are seeing all the goods before we get there. Okay. Just to prepare y'all, we're actually not going to be reviewing an article today. I'm going to be sharing a lot of resources with y'all at the end, but we've gone through quite a bit of the research already. As an agency, when we refer to psychological flexibility and utilizing this with learners, we call it DRA, right? Differential reinforcement of an alternative behavior. And that's primarily because what we're reinforcing in the end is this alternative behavior of engaging in one of these coping skills. Because the reality is that psychological flexibility, as we've learned throughout this series, really does help us as individuals and as practitioners practice these coping skills on a regular basis. But then it also then in return helps us teach this to others. I have often told people that I never really want a learner to be able to say, oh, that's a diffusion strategy, or that's an example of self as context. Mostly because that's jargon, right? It's like telling a kid that you're working on their manding goal, right? So I never really have them do something like that. This is more of a practice, right? This is a skill set. We can then understand what it is from like a verbal behavior relational frame perspective of values, committed action, self as context, present moment, diffusion, and acceptance. But for our learners that we may work with, or the students that we may work with and their families, they don't need to necessarily know that's the term that goes along with the coping skill or the action that we present. And that's really that's it. No, I'm joking. But that's really what I want everybody to take away more than anything is that main idea. And again, that this isn't necessarily something you're going to be able to teach somebody else how to do unless you're practicing this yourself. And so that's why I said that this is the final step, right? But it's not really ever final. Dr. Hayes talks about how acceptance and commitment therapy is really a practice, and it's like riding a bike or a horse or whatever else you might fail at, right? Fall off, get back on, try again. That's all that we can ask of ourselves. That's all that we can ask of students that we work with, people that we work with. Okay, so today's learning objectives. We are going to review, again, as we always do, 6 core processes, but we're going to add in those core yearnings now that we've actually gotten a little bit more in depth with them. Now, we're going to get into what happens if still this all is going on. We utilize SBT, skills-based treatment within our agency. So with that, we really promote functional communication training, tolerance response training, right? Those pauses between the aversive stimulus and the response. But sometimes we still find ourselves in the need to respond in a safe way. And most of us have been given training for de-escalation, right? I'm going to talk a little bit more about that though from an ACT lens and what that looks like. This isn't by any means, disclaimer alert, this isn't by any means meant to replace CPI, PCM, safety care, any of those crisis management um, solutions. This is just how you might be able to utilize those same strategies while also modeling this practice of psychological flexibility. So we're going to get into that a little bit. So a little backwards chain. Then we're going to talk about the antecedents. What does this look like to teach these skills? How do we use non-contingent reinforcement? How do we use Mark Dixon's curriculum of AIM? And what does this look like in practice? So really, we're just going to review some of my data. It's important to look at the data to see what's going on, right? And then I'm going to end with here you are. We didn't get in depth with these books, but I'd like for you to know about them. They're great resources. They're pretty inexpensive and accessible, and I highly recommend them. So, all right, moving right along then. Oh, thank you. I'm glad I put this in there. Remind me, because I definitely already forgot. ABA in practice, using antecedent strategies in practice. So, remember, if you want ACE credit for this CEU credit, this one is a learning CEU, you will need to email ace@acrossenvironments.com, your BCBA number, as well as your three takeaways. The three takeaways is because that's what the board makes us do. So you have to. Sorry. Please allow 2 weeks. It might need a little bit longer just because of the holidays. So if for some reason there's an emergency situation, email me. I can usually do something to help you out. If you get an out of office response, that's because I'm technically out of office right after this. But that's fine. I'm happy to help. It just also might be on the 28th. And I apologize about that. Okay. So CEU credit, don't forget. Let's go through it. Let's see what we remember. I think that, some of these terms can be tricky, but just like we were able to learn this whenever we were studying for the exam, it's kind of the same thing, the same principle, the same philosophy. So I encourage you to do the same types of review, whether it be some sort of SAFMEDS, practice, whatever it might be. Okay, so let's go through. What are these 6 core processes? Psychological flexibility, right? Acceptance, diffusion, self as context, present moment, committed actions, and values. We often will think about this as a kind of a spectrum or a pendulum or a matrix. It's how it's been presented, or a choice point, right? So we have this feeling happening, we're having these thoughts happening, and we have the opportunity to make a choice. That's that flexibility piece, right? And that choice can either guide us more towards our values or take us away from our values, more avoidant. Sometimes that can be tricky to recognize too. If we think that what we're doing is leading us towards our values, but really what could be happening is that our values are in conflict with each other. That's a typical situation that happens for human beings in this that we call life that's just what it is right now. So our values can often conflict with each other. And so that's when it's really important to constantly practice this assessment and reevaluation of What is the priority right now? Well, I think clearly at 1 o'clock, when this CEU is ended, my value is going to 100% shift to just my family from learning and education and helping. Because when I reprioritize for the holiday break, this is where my priorities are going to shift. My out of office is going on, right? And that's fine. That is, again, where those values can shift. Whereas, let's say that I were to only look at like this is an extreme example, and it's only because it's the stimulus in front of me. Only look at pictures of my kids constantly instead of reviewing treatment plans and submitting them to insurance during the day while my kids are at school. The value of family can't then be avoidant, right? I can't say like, oh my, but it's because I value my family so much that I look at pictures of them all day long. I cannot, I can't review this treatment plan right now. No, I have to be able to provide this service to others. And unfortunately, the only way to do it is by insurance right now, because that's the model that is set up. But I also see long term how that benefits my family, right? And adds to that value. So we often have to reprioritize. And again, that was a very extreme example, but we often have to reprioritize what our values are, which then affects our committed actions, right? Those behaviors that we engage in that are in alignment with our values. What work are we going to be doing? What demonstrates that what we say we value is truly something that we value? And then sometimes, too, what can end up happening is this inability to engage in what's currently happening, the present moment. So when we're struggling with that, it's important that we start practicing what it looks like to be in the present moment. So let's do it right now. Each of us do a little bit of a grounding exercise, both feet on the floor. Take off your shoes if you want to. Get a little comfortable. Here we go. Pull your shoulders back. Take a drink of water. Observe what's happening around you. Blend in a little bit with that self as context. Observe what's happening in you, any tight spaces, any tension, any thoughts that are kind of pulling you away from right now. This is that moment to say, oh, that doesn't matter right now. I'm going to try, right? It's a practice to be fully engaged here. All right. And then sometimes our mind still gets really hooked on whatever problem might be going on, whatever untruth or unhelpful thought might be happening. And when that is happening, it's important for us to practice some form of quick diffusion, whether it's through laughter or song or movement or an exercise. One of my favorite diffusion exercises is a metaphor, and I believe it is in Act Made Simple, but it's one of those that's kind of everywhere. And I know that I've seen like a video example of Dr. Hayes doing this with a large group or small group. And it is where you are, it's a partner exercise, but you have somebody holding on to one end of a rope with you or a ribbon or whatever it might be. And the whole time you're kind of fighting each other, right? Because you're like, hey, you got to pull this over, right? You've got to have control over this. And it's usually a whole bunch of stuff that we can't control, right? That's the representation of another person. Because I know us as behavior analysts, we don't like to say this. We can't really control another person, right? All we can really do is improve the environment, modify the environment, change the environment for the allowance of a behavior to happen, right? And then reinforce that so that we can hope that that happens over time more frequently, right? But we can't truly control what's happening on the other end. And this is often when we start thinking about like all of our troubles and our issues, right? So I invite you to kind of think about some of the things that constantly invade your thoughts. Um, for some of us, it's this ideal of perfection, timeliness, right? We're going to get into our core yearnings, right? But some of those things ring true. Changes of our schedule, that disorientation, those are things that we can't control, but that happens to us often as people who are in this service industry where we interact with other humans. So those are things that we really can't control, the perception that others may have of us, right? So what do we do? Are we going to continue to fight it and try to pull it over to our side? Or is that just going to blow out our shoulder, right? This tug of war that we're playing with others. And with others, I mean our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, the things that we can't control. So, what Dr. Hayes invites us to do is to let it go, drop the rope. What happens? What's interesting about this metaphor is that it's one of those metaphors that you can physically feel within your body, right? There's a sensation that occurs. So, if you invite a friend or a loved one or a partner to do this with you, where they hold on to the other end of the rope and they're pulling as hard as they can, right? And then eventually I want you to tell them, like, let go. You'll also feel the relief, right? The tension is released. This is a diffusion exercise that helps us then gather acceptance of this is something that's out of my control. So I know that I was talking about how at the beginning of we're really going to talk about the application today. So what does this look like? What can we not control sometimes? Well, let's say that all of our antecedent strategies went to crap. None of them, like major setting events are going on, right? And here you are walking into hellfire and damnation, right? And you can tell that there's an extinction burst going on, and it's not anything that you had anything to do with. You literally can't reinforce it. For example, the iPad is out for the day. He kiddo threw it, it's done busted. There is no iPad, there is no backup. Sorry, we are in an extinction burst. You have all offered alternatives, caregivers have offered alternatives. Nothing's working. You know, nothing's going to work, truly. You're going to try your best, right? But you're still in this type of extinction burst. Or the demand can't be removed. Health and safety are at play. You have to keep this demand in place, whatever it might be. And you know that you're going through some form of escape extinction. So notice that I've talked about tangible extinction and escape extinction. I'm going to refrain from discussing attention extinction because what we're going to be getting into here in a little bit, I just genuinely feel as though that it would be impossible, from my clinical opinion, to fully remove attention from whatever it is that from these extinction components, if that makes sense. So this is what we're going to talk about is how do we apply these six different core processes of psychological flexibility when the storms are blowing in, right? You've already done my way. You've already done okay. And you're like, crap, it's time for me to be able to reinforce this. And you can't. What are you going to do? Greg Haley will tell you, I know, but it's real tough, right? Provide empathy. He's not wrong. Empathy and is what we're going to talk about today. Compassion and. Okay, so we were talking about this just a minute ago with our core yearnings. So sometimes our thoughts and our feelings, these unhelpful things that we might be saying to ourselves, ironically enough, can sometimes happen in other people. I know. Some behavior analysts will tell you that's very mentalistic to even consider. I'm here to tell you we have some shared inner behavior, and sometimes it's not always helpful. And it is all of these things have still been shaped through our environment over time, through reinforcement and punishment contingencies over time, right? We get that as behavior analysts. So, our core yearnings that we talked about last month, there's one that really is physiological. And when I say physiological, I also mean evolutionary. It's something that we have always had because it's developed as part of us as being pack creatures by nature. Kill or be killed. No, stay in your group or you might get eaten. It's part of our amygdala, right? To need to belong to something. There's safety in belonging. Again, one of those reasons why you'll notice that I didn't discuss attention extinction just a second ago. Self-directed meaning. What am I supposed to do with my life? We struggle with that still sometimes, some of us more than others. This is why when we look at these core yearnings, some of them are going to be more strongly felt or observed through the functions of behavior, right? Like what we talked about in the last step, step 11. Nope, step 10. Just kidding. They're all running together. So some of these are going to be a little bit stronger than others, and typically will present themselves through a function of behavior, escape, attention, tangible, automatic, sensory, sure. Some people might argue that, especially when we're looking at feeling and orientation. Many of us as adults struggle with this core yearning of competence because of our histories with education, because of our histories with family, because of our desire to learn, our strong value of learning and education. And then if we look at coherence, it's just the need for understanding, the need to be understood. How are we fostering that through engagement? How are we allowing for communication to happen? And, right? Functional communication training and SBT and. And then when we look at feeling, this can also be the extreme opposite of avoidant feeling. Many of us as behavior analysts have turned off that part of our observation skill because we were told to, and then reinforced over time by taking out emotion. We take it out of the way that we have to report. Yeah, that doesn't mean we have to take it out of our personal lives. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about the core yearning of feeling, is that sometimes we might then be so absent of trying to feel, that it may look as though we are incapable of feeling. And that's not true because we're humans. And then on the extreme side of that, this is why I was saying it could be automatic, this intense need to seek feeling, right? From a physiological standpoint, where it comes out in behavior and not just remaining inner, right? And then orientation. We were talking about this earlier when our schedules change. That dings at this core yearning of orientation and the need for schedule and routine and the need for things to go as we planned. I had two things get canceled today that I wasn't planning on. Another inconvenience happened, and then something else. That could really start to wear on us over time. And so you can see how over time these things can look like they've been shaped because they have been through our learning histories, through schedules of reinforcement, of intermittent reinforcement, and intermittent punishment. That also then can look like we might be trying to avoid or escape something, or that we're seeking attention from someone when the reality is that we're seeking safety because we're scared that we're going to get eaten. So these are the things that we have to consider too whenever we're looking at the four functions of behavior when we're applying this kind of acceptance and commitment therapy lens. Okay, our second learning objective. So something's happened. Our learner is in distress. Someone in our environment is in distress. We have zero direct control over their body, despite what three-step guided compliance may say. So, what do you do first? This is where it's your time to shine. It's your moment. You've been practicing all of these coping skills. You've been practicing ACT. What does this look like for you now in action? So for me, I immediately stand up because I'm going to still use everything that I know from, we use safety care in our agency, that I know from safety care. And I'm not here to teach that. So all I do is run through what that looks like. I'm going to stand up, make myself as neutrally calm as possible, but my heart's beating real fast because I can feel it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to just kind of start swaying. And because I've been through some of my own like therapy, as we encourage a lot of people to do, I'm also going to just kind of engage in some bilateral tapping, either on my shoulders or my legs. I'm going to do it on my shoulders just so that y'all can see. And you can see also, while I'm not standing, I'm still swaying. And this is also something that I do. I take a big breath and I let it out really slowly. And then I might tact something like, oh man, it's really hot in here. I need to grab some water. And I'm going to grab some water. This whole time, I am not telling the learner to do anything or the person to do anything. All I'm doing is practicing my own diffusion skills, present moment, right? I'm now, though, going to engage in a committed action. Hey, so and so, can you go and help? Can you come in and help me? I didn't yell team. I demanded for help. Awesome. Thanks for coming in to help me. Reinforcing the behavior. Can you help me move X, Y, and Z from the room to keep so and so safe? We're just here to keep you safe. First time that I've addressed the person. So we're gonna move everything that we can just to be on the safe side. I'm gonna drink some more water. Okay. Now, typically at this point, I'm already seeing de-escalation. The only reason is that I'm modeling these skills. There's no expectation, there's no demand. I'm just engaging in my own psychological flexibility process, diffusion strategies, taking deep breaths, tacting things that I see or hear or feel. I might talk to the helper, but not in a ignoring way to the person, but in a today has been a day of growth, right? Isn't this great to see how much calmer everyone is today, right? So again, like we're not saying anything about how this person needs to be calmer. They are actually already demonstrating that they're calmer. This extinction burst is a lot calmer, right? Now I'm going to continue to model, right, until we reach HRE again. The reason why we still have training for crisis intervention is because you never know. But what we have found is that if we do this consistently, and as soon as we see that FCT isn't going to be like we've listened to them, we're like, okay, they've demanded for what they wanted. Now we have to tolerate the no or the transition or the demand. What are we going to do? You can do time delay, sure. Sometimes that's not always going to be appropriate for the environment or able to be implemented within that environment. Because honestly, one of my favorite ways to do, because we do, sorry, back up a little bit, with another learner that we don't use a lot of ACT with the exception of modeling these things, is SBT over and over and over again, right? Until eventually we get that assent. And that has been very effective for him. But for some other learners, you might now need to be like, okay, we're here and we can't go back and I can't prompt for this again because we're already here and we know that that happens. It's just the unfortunate thing of human behavior sometimes. Sometimes we all reach our breaking point, even if nobody's directly implementing ABA with us, right? Or even if we're not in a school and a teacher says something that we don't like, every single one of us reaches our breaking point. We just have a little bit more stimulus control typically. And I say typically because, again, variables. There are always variables. So, what are you going to do? Well, you're going to practice this again and you're going to keep modeling it for the people in your environment where we need to do this to be that safe space for them so that you're providing that empathy and offering the choice to engage in one of these behaviors that you're modeling. And then again, consistency over time. So all of these essentially are, again, what we would call differential reinforcement of alternative behaviors. If they engage in any one of those behaviors that's been modeled for them, or then some, right? Maybe they've engaged, maybe they can recall one of their own, and then they start engaging in that. Fantastic. It's an alternative behavior. Some would say that's an other behavior, but we're not doing this over time. So we're not going to call this a DRO, right? So we've got this alternative behavior. We're going to reinforce it as best as we possibly can. And if we have to go through it again because we still have to go through tolerating the no again, unfortunately we will, but we're going to have a safe space for that to happen. You can also still do this, right? Like there's always some extinction with shaping procedures. That's just the reality of it, right? So if we're shaping a behavior, there's one response that's no longer going to be reinforced, right? That's extinction. But really what we're trying to shape here is, okay, they're still on the floor and but they're no longer screaming. I'm going to reinforce that, right? Okay, they're still on the floor, but they're no longer screaming, and I can get closer to them without them attempting to aggress towards me. I'm going to reinforce that. Okay. All right, now they're sitting up. I'm going to reinforce that. Fantastic. Now they're taking a sip of water. They've asked for water. I'm going to reinforce that. So again, we're providing all of these shaping procedures too throughout these responses. So we're also providing the positive and negative reinforcement as we need to, whether it be negative reinforcement because the relief from their throat no longer hurting after drinking water, fine. I'm also going to praise it with positive reinforcement, right? Cool. And again, with as far as attention is concerned, attention's still there. And this is also because this is from our one of our agency practices and understandings, which is we assume that there's trauma in in their histories. And when we assume trauma, we also assume that there is attention as part of the function of behavior, which would then show us from an ACT lens that core yearning of belonging needs to be addressed. And if I were to engage in attention extinction, what I would really ultimately potentially be doing is signaling a more radical or higher magnitude behavioral response to happen because it's signaling that there isn't belonging and that the pack is retreating away from the individual, right? So again, we're trying to prevent that from happening. And I'm not providing direct attention, right? With the exception of when I'm starting to be able to provide positive reinforcement with praise and attention for these shaped behavioral responses. But I am not removing myself. And I'm continuing to just co-regulate through my behavior, my action by modeling. Okay, just to hit the nail on this one again, hit the hammer on the nail again. It's not a demand. I'm not telling them to take a drink of water. I'm not telling them to take a deep breath. I'm not telling them to calm down. I'm offering choices by modeling like a free operant preference assessment, if you will. These are available for you. Whatever you want to engage in, this is offered. Cool. So again, let's back it up a little bit. Now your learner's in recovery, right? Things are safe, they're ready to move forward. Are we just never going to talk about it? Are we never going to address it? Usually it's best to, so that you can start teaching alternative behaviors as an antecedent strategy, right? So we talked about a metaphor earlier with our tug of war. You can start with hands-on activities. Start with teaching what it feels like to practice some of these things. These metaphors aren't, this is a diffusion exercise. Here's what I mean by this. No, they're just available, right? For engagement. You can talk about what it might feel like. So I have an RET who's fantastic. She's our lead trainer and she's been with us forever. One of her favorites to do is to do it in a group. She'll take a cup with shaving cream and food coloring. Most of us have seen this kind of science experiment, but she'll have each of the learners have a different color. And then she'll say, okay, I want each of you to drop a drop and then tell us like one thing that sometimes bothers you, right? And each of them do this. And then they notice too, like what happens after the shaving cream and it just kind of like diffuses into the water and what that looks like. And so she doesn't talk about diffusion, but she's like, oh my gosh. But notice how when you say this to yourself after that, what happens? You feel better, right? It changes it a little bit. And so then she'll talk about how the shaving cream is what you say, that change, so that you're doing something that's helpful to give that shift, right? It's a great activity. There are tons of books right now that have a lot of metaphors for teaching ACT. I will say that my favorite, as far as evidence-based is concerned, is Mark Dixon's AIM curriculum. And that's because it also starts with a questionnaire assessment. So you have the psychological flexibility questionnaire. There's an adult form, and there's also a child form. So I love to compare those answers. And then what that really does is give you a better understanding, right, of your baseline of, okay, so this student is actually really able to engage in present moment awareness quickly, readily, and for long durations, which is amazing. And that's a strength. So if I'm looking for something high probability to go to, it's going to be present moment, right? Whereas I'm noticing that diffusion, right? This practice of separation and kind of maybe being a little silly or letting things go is actually kind of a challenge for them. So this might be where we do more of our metaphors and more of our practices as teaching skills, right? And then we always like to do naturalistic stuff. So challenges are going to arise. So what can you do? My favorite is increasing the inner response time by engaging in some sort of present moment awareness exercise. For example, let's say that you have a student who is about to engage in a very non-preferred task. You might say, okay, before we go do, I want us to take a deep breath together. Okay, both feet on the ground. Let's do it. In, out. Awesome. Cool. We do this with one kid, and we've been doing it now for a long time. And we started off with just that 3 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And now she's up to doing something like breathing in for a minute, and then she assents every time. And it's really awesome. So, again, like natural challenges are going to come up. Have them pause before, embed it with that transition warning. Hey, we're about to do this really hard thing. Yeah, let's take a deep breath before we do it. Yeah, let's have a sip of water before we do it. We're going to be reading. Okay, cool. Let's drink. Sorry, water. Let's have some water, not OPA, but OPA. It's time. This is the season. Okay, so again, prime these expectations. So engage in this present moment before it happens. We're going to do this hard thing. Hey, we're all done with this now. Okay, more time, right? You can prime it. Give a little extra space between the stimulus and the response if you need to. That's an evidence-based procedure. Another thing that I love, as many of you know, is precision teaching. Timings can be your friend, especially when you have someone who can tact and label and vocally express things. For example, having them say, I can say this, or this, or this, or this, or this, or this in 30 seconds. When this happens, it's really helpful, especially whenever we go back to those response strategies of like, okay, what's actually something that this person has said that they can do with fluency? They've said, I can take a deep breath. So I'm going to model that right away. They've also said, I can have a drink of water. I'm going to model that too, right? I'm going to model the things that I know they have expressed during these teaching trials. And then again, check for understanding. Hey, when we talk about this as something that you care about, what does that mean to you? Right? When you say you want to do this, what does that look like? We're checking for the verbal report to match the committed action. And that's fine. That's good behavior analysis. Now you can also continue to check throughout those metaphors. So what does this cloud, what does this shaving cream mean to you? Yeah, it is like a cloud. What do clouds do? What happens when a cloud blocks the sun? Do we see the sun as well? Oh, so what does that mean? Now, what if our thoughts were the sun? What happens if we put a cloud in front of it? We see our thoughts as clearly, right? So again, like you can go through and check for understanding with different questions throughout these metaphors. Okay, we're wrapping up. We're wrapping up the end of our year-long series. Again, we as practitioners have been talking about compassion now for quite a long time. We've talked about empathy for quite a long time. What does it look like? This is what it looks like. Many of us can say, no, I'm a compassionate provider because you feel, and that's fantastic. Now, what are some other actions that you can take that go along with that? Okay, so this is the data. Crazy. So, you can still see, we still see some avoidance. That's pretty natural, especially after something has happened. And usually each of these bumps, something pretty big happened. Aggression, crazily enough, it does look like we went through an extinction burst about a year ago, doesn't it? Yeah. It was actually pretty bad. The 6 months before, 4 months before. This particular learner was in an intensive inpatient facility for December. This was her second time to be in an inpatient. The first time was during COVID, and then she was released because of COVID. So, a long history of self-injury, a long history of aggression, a long history of extreme distress responses, of crying, statements of self-harm, um, hours long, days long. So what we started with her back in 2020 was ACT. And this has been embedded in her day for the past almost five, no, yeah, 4.5 years. So for 4.5 years, we've been going through metaphors with her on a weekly and now daily basis. She goes through choice point exercises on a daily basis where she says, okay, like this is what I'm valuing. This is how or she'll say, this is what I value today, right? Or this is what I truly care about today. Here's what I'm going to do to show that. A couple of weeks ago, she had a dance performance. It was an all school dance performance. This would have been unheard of for her to do last year or the year before, um, or before then, right? Like um, it's crazy, but that's what she valued. She said, I want to perform, and this is what I'm going to do to show that I can do it. And so, yeah, we still have some avoidance redirections. Okay. We still have some boundary redirections. Okay. But we don't have 90 instances of aggression, which is pretty great. And you can't see, but she did have another little bout of aggression in October, but it lasted, I think, a total of 7 minutes. And all I did was model exactly what we did before. And it was just like, okay, I am actually safe here and I can practice these coping skills. I can do this, right? And I will say most of her data is actually charted, so it's hard for me to share a lot of her graphs because then I would have to interpret all of them, and it's a lot. Okay, so wrapping up this afternoon before my out of office goes up, some additional readings for y'all. Y'all, A Liberated Mind. If you haven't read it yet, it's really dense. So I recommend the Audible version so at least you hear it and you can drive instead of trying to read it. But it is very good, incredibly informative, and it also just gives that good why behind Dr. Hayes and what he had to say for sure. Um, Thank you for the amazing feedback. I appreciate that, Rana. Act Made Simple. This one has all of my favorite metaphors in it. And I would say adult metaphors. So for us trying to gain our own understanding of ACT and what this looks like in practice, I think that Russ Harris adds a really beautiful and humanistic lens to it, where Dr. Hayes does a beautiful job of providing this behavior analytic lens to it. So for me, Russ Harris kind of meets where it kind of helps us with that application piece. And I know I talked about this earlier. I do actually really like Accept, Identify, Move, the AIM curriculum. Um, Keep in mind, not everything that you're going to read is going to be totally applicable for the kids that you work with, and that's okay. Skip it and move on, or paraphrase it as best as you can so that it still makes sense. Oh, and then I didn't write this correctly. I'm sorry. It's the Calm and Connected Journal for Kids. Leanne Page and her daughters wrote this together. I've been doing this with my daughter, and it's actually really awesome. It's a beautiful little tool. Um, and Leanne put a lot of thought behind it. Her girls put a lot of thought behind it, but they have really great metaphors in it that are truly accessible for kids. It's designed to go like week by week. You can do it day by day. It's really pretty open for however makes the most sense for you. There are breathing exercises in there. It's super cute. I highly recommend it. Um, Along those same lines, if you're looking for something that's a little bit more of a advanced, like teen tween mother-daughter relationship, Uniquely Us is a journal that is by Eli Harwood. She's an attachment therapist, so keep in mind that most of these things are going to be in a frame of attachment theory. But again, when we're talking about committed actions and diffusion strategies and things like that, journaling is a really great committed action to engage in and to do something that's, if you're really trying to work on relationships too, and this kind of co-regulation. Great place to start. And then the happiness trap. Again, another Russ Harris um, book, but another fantastic one. He really encourages us to recognize that it's the journey, not the destination. There's this kind of like myth about happiness and what it's supposed to be. But the reality is that it's not happiness so much as it is, all right, I can accept where I am, when I am, and who I am in this exact moment, and still see that no, not everything is going to be flowers and roses all the time, and that's okay. And I'm still going to be able to learn something from this opportunity, and I'm still going to be able to grow and experience more things because of whatever my circumstances might be currently. So again, it's another great resource for y'all. Screenshot this if you need to. Okay. All right, y'all. So thank you so much. It's been a year. I appreciate everybody dealing with my technological issues, my missed recordings, my changes in my schedule, and all of that beautiful stuff. Truly, it's been a lot, but y'all have been a fantastic audience. The feedback from the recordings has also been really great. So thank y'all very much. I appreciate it a lot. Please don't forget that if you want to catch up on any of the series, it's always available. Right now, we're still doing our end of year sale. So I think the code is end of year. Um, 50% off all CEUs, including supervision and ethics CEUs. For all of those, please send your takeaways, at least three, to ace@acrossenvironments.com and kindly allow us 2 weeks to process. All right, everyone, have a fantastic end of the year. And I will let y'all know any announcements for 2026 once I've figured them out. But I hope y'all all have a fantastic holiday season and Happy New Year. Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.